trio of goddesses. How
We've
beautiful.
got a beautiful trio of goddesses today.
Mm.
So let me introduce you. So I want to introduce you first, Suzannah. We're joined by the wonderful, inspiring woman, Suzannah Ananda, who shares her journey with us today of overcoming a lifetime of trauma, pain, and abuse, which I know personally I understand, and I know a lot of viewers you will also understand as well. From a childhood marked by sexual abuse and domestic violence, fleeing home at 15, battling addiction, and enduring emergency back surgery. Wow. Suzannah Ananda has faced incredible challenges, including a generational trauma and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for anyone that does not know what that stands for. Through her resilience and commitment to healing, she found empowerment through natural medicines, plant medicine, sound alchemy, yoga, and breath work. By reclaiming her worth and embracing self-love, she now stands as a beacon of hope, and I'm going to say strength for others, encouraging those struggling to know that they are not alone and they are absolutely worthy just as they are. So join us today as we share Suzannah Ananda's story of transformation and the importance of actually breaking the cycle of transgenerational trauma and future, and actually repairing and dreaming future generations yet to come. So welcome, beautiful Suzannah. Um, and for those of you that can also see a beautiful goddess there in white, she's her own majestic empress in her magic and also in her medicine. And she's joining today as a Freebird observer and a trainee for this podcast to also step in and support other people's journeys. So, Suzannah.
Yes, thank you so
Hello.
much for having me, darling. It's an absolute pleasure to be here joining with you to share such important messages. When you put out the call to ask if anyone would like to talk about these topics, it's something for many years that I didn't have the courage to talk about. It was something that I kept in the shadows for a long time, and knowing how much more that built my fear, my shame, my trauma, and my pain, essentially, by not sharing, gave me, I guess, the extra strength and courage to come forward and share my messages more. So that has led me here today.
I love that. So I've got some really cool questions for you, but just, I think, leading on from what you're saying, how did you come to that place of moving from fear of sharing your journey and actually being courageous? What instigated that courage for you? What was the first step to?
Yeah, the first time I shared my story was actually just after leaving my second violent relationship. So I was in 10 years of horrific domestic violence over two relationships. And knowing that I survived that, and many women don't, and I did fear that I wouldn't at times also, that it was because it thrives in silence. It keeps happening in silence, and knowing that, you know, being able to still have my life, being able to be here was for a reason, knowing that I needed to start not just speaking up for myself and my family to break the patterns and the chains, but for all women and all people collectively to speak up and have a voice for the voiceless, because mine had been squashed for so long.
Suzannah, can I ask you, when you say domestic violence thrives in silence, like I'm almost in tears
Mhm.
because it actually so many women are experiencing it and so ashamed or scared to speak up. And a lot of times when I am with my beautiful women, they don't even know if it is violence because they've been manipulated and controlled. So can I ask you to just explain a little bit more about why it thrives in violence? And you don't need to necessarily go into the domestic abuse that you face, but just talk about what domestic abuse actually is and what it was for you.
Yeah. So for me, I experienced the whole variety. So the violence, I've had the physical, the mental, the emotional, the controlling, all aspects. And some people do face all, some only face one, which can be, financial abuse, controlling. So for me, the two relationships were different in some ways. But either way, they completely disempowered me. They took away my power. They had me in fear. And I held so much guilt and so much shame for not feeling strong enough, for not being able to leave, for not being able to do what I thought was right for my children because I felt helpless. So then I had the mother guilt, and then, not wanting to speak up and tell people because what would they think? And then when people did know, when family did find out some of the things, then I had a whole new level of shame because I was even so confused. Why couldn't I leave? I'm such a strong woman. My second violent relationship during that time, I was a personal trainer. I was strong. I was fit. I was literally building myself to the point that I built my own personal training business called Empower Fitness for women. Little did I know in hindsight that I was literally empowering myself at the same time. Sorry,
Wow.
trying to join, excuse me.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Kitty. We love that.
And no one knew. No one knew. So externally, I was this fit, strong, healthy, everyone, I guess, in a way looked up or admired my strength, my fitness, my relationship even as such, because I kept it so well hidden. I had a psychologist at the time that told me what a beautiful mask I wore, which I was confused by at the time. And I understand now because I had the persona or the mask or the external person. And at home, I was crumbling to pieces, fearing for my life, sometimes not sleeping. And then, periods of time where then there was alcohol to numb the pain, or, it's quite a horrific journey. So in the saying that it thrives in silence, is the shame and the guilt that we're harboring and keeping ourselves from speaking up out of fear is what allows it to continue. Is what is happening far too often. I know there's some horrible statistics out there of how many people are dying regularly from this. And it's just not okay. And so for me, when I first spoke out about that, people were shocked. A lot of people didn't have a clue. And, I was very shaky, very, very shaky when I first spoke up. And then even the aftermath of, then facing wow, okay, this is me. I am a survivor of domestic violence. And actually, rather than just wearing my strong mask, I had to then sit in my fear, my pain, my emotions, my vulnerabilities, and actually some of the things I was so controlled, manipulated, it was a very psychologically manipulative one, the second relationship as well. So my brain was so muddled that I didn't know if I was coming or going. I believed a lot of what I was told about it being my fault. I was told because one of my previous partners was abusive that I was the common denominator and that it was my fault that I did this to men. There's so many things. My son was often brought into arguments to turn against me, and we're still working through things, almost 10 years later. There's so many parts that, my children were used against me a few times as well, in situations when I couldn't be there. When he had them in his care, he would even then sometimes use them against me, and, with threats, some horrible threats. So, it was a pretty horrific time.
Oh, I can imagine. And everything that you're saying, I'm just, I want to ask her this question and this question. Yeah. So I've got to remember some of the questions, but thank you for sharing with such strength and transparency and vulnerability, Suzannah, because I can actually hear in your voice now, there is a level of empowerment. I can hear that strength. And I can hear the shamelessness in, hey, this happens to so many of us, and actually so many strong women too, because we fight for our relationships and we fight for our families and we want things to be really good. And so my question for you is, when you say, I've got a couple of questions, but when you say people were they surprised because you're strong, or were they surprised because your relationship on the surface looked really kind of good and they didn't expect him to be or them to be that type of person? That's the first question. And the second is around when did the abuse start kicking in?
Yeah. So the first part was I did keep quite a strong exterior, definitely. So part of my brand, my business, my personal training was, I was all kickboxing, heavy weights, go, go, go. I was very yang and in my masculine, dominant energy. And then, so people that didn't know him, my family and a few people started to understand what was happening throughout, but people externally did not see that in him. No, they very charismatic, very charming, very, all the ways in the world. So that's where the shock or the surprise was there, because we looked like, the fitness couple, or, perfect looking outside exterior relationship as such. It was crumbling on the inside. So it was only a matter of months when the first lot of violence started. It was quite a quick and deep relationship. I felt I had someone that really wanted to know me. He wanted to know everything about me, wanted to get to know the ins and outs, and really quickly. I suppose that's a part as well that I didn't know how to take space back then. I had fallen into relationships ongoing codependently because I wasn't aware of that either. So it was
That's why the slowness is so important, isn't it? Just even for our nervous systems and for the container and for the boundaries, just getting to know somebody in the slowness and the sensuality, taking time.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if only my nervous system then could have known now, but that wasn't my path. I wouldn't be here right now if that wasn't the case.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was only about 2, maybe 3 months max. We were at a friend's party and we were chatting, and it was my friends. He didn't, lo and behold, have any friends, family, anyone. So yeah, I must have mentioned on the topic of sex. I think sex came up as a topic. We spoke about that. And I had no clue that anything was wrong until we got back to our hotel room after the party. Obviously, we'd had alcohol as well. And then he just snapped. It was just like started at me and started telling me how disgusting I was for talking about that, and how dare I talk about anything, to do with our personal life. And it was like a completely different side, like a demonic almost side. And that turned to lamps getting thrown across the room, and, just a whole night of the first night of swearing, and, really just in a state of shock, that's how that began.
Gosh, that's really scary for you and scary for anyone listening here. This could be and can quite possibly be quite triggering. So recommending you take a deep breath and also realizing realizing what's going on for your body, but also realizing the choices and the empowerment, the faith involved in, understanding that you are in that situation to begin with, but also, if you choose to move out of that situation, there is definitely a light in the end at the end of the tunnel. And Suzannah, you're actually a beautiful mascot for that. What I wanted to say to you as well, this is the trauma that is experienced with mental, psychological, emotional abuse. Is often you don't see the physical scars, and often someone isn't throwing, laying any punches into you or anything like that physically. So how did you notice these manipulation tactics, or how did you notice this as abuse? And what would you say to the viewers that will say to you, oh no, but we're in love, or he was just mad, or it's my fault? Because I feel like a lot of the times we're made to feel like it's our fault, we're the ones in the wrong, and so we continue pushing ourselves down and trying very hard to be perfect, but in the end it actually ends up being like a freaking confused. It's like your brain's fragmented. I don't know. Is that what you would experience?
Yeah. So I was, absolutely. Brain fragmentation is exactly how, once I eventually came out of it, or brain fog was definitely how I felt. So it starts smaller and then kind of gradually builds, but everything ending up getting turned against you or being your fault as such, that's a huge red flag in itself, with no self-responsibility. Me in healthy, conscious relationships now knows this. With no self-responsibility, with no healthy communication, if anyone's finger pointing and blaming and everything's being made out to be your fault, there's a huge, huge signal there as it is. And, yes, you may love someone, but love isn't enough if it's not healthy. And until we understand ourselves at a deeper level, at a nervous system level even, it may not be healthy love. It may be, as I kept following on in my life, unhealthy, codependent relationships that were actually more like trauma bonds underneath. So for me, this one was also, there was lots of the psychological, lots of the mental, emotional, but there was also a lot of physical as well. It was the whole combination. So coming out of that, then is a whole new journey on its own in the healing journey. Because you are so lost, confused, you don't really even know who you are anymore, because you've been walking around trying to be so perfect, trying to walk on eggshells so that the bomb doesn't go off, so you don't have to have another night of no sleep or another, night of demonic rages or, I was quite often choked a lot, and a lot of broken furniture or put through furniture physically as well. There was quite a lot of things. So it's a whole repair energetically, physically, mentally, emotionally that begins after leaving, when you can finally come to some safety and begin the journey of returning back home to your body, because I, during those times, didn't really even know I had a body, which led to me, overdoing it with everything I did as well.
And I mean, him abusing your body
Mm.
is just like, I didn't know I had a body, and then therefore he abuses my body, which is like coming back into the body. This is my temple. This is my home. This is my sovereignty. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, you are not to actually abuse any of this in any shape, way, and form. It's like the reclamation of, I know that I'm here in my body in this life for a reason, and it's not to be abused. So I just really want to acknowledge that. I'm curious to know, like, did you love this person? Like, were there genuine feelings there? Is that why it was so hard for you to understand? I don't know, like, why did you stay? Was there genuine feelings and love for this person?
Yeah, I felt there was genuine feelings. I'm not sure so much now whether they were genuine feelings or whether they were me. I have a deep abandonment wound. So whether it was me clinging on to that because of the wounds, but when things were good, they were really good. So it was like this catastrophic roller coaster, really. So, in the beginning, and the times that we had with me and my children were really good. So when they were good, they were beautiful. We would go camping. We would do all the things I thought I really did love and want to do. And having a, quote unquote, broken family, no longer having the father of my children, I feel like I was always trying to find a father figure as such, or replace a father figure. And when he was so good with the children in so many ways, and so beautiful and so loving, and all the wonderful things in the world, when it was good, you cling to that. And then after the catastrophic side, there was generally apology, and it's not going to happen again, and the remorse and things like that. So it's on top of the pure exhaustion and the brain fog, it's really quite a challenging time to navigate any sense out of.
Oh, absolutely. And so I want to ask you how you broke free, but before that, you mentioned that there was some usage of like to numb the pain. There was alcohol, maybe drugs, to actually just numb the pain, and almost like self-medicating. Can you tell me about that? And then at what point did you realize that you needed to make that change for the recovery journey? And did that affect the violence in the house as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, alcohol had been my favorite growing up in a small country town, party, recreation / numbing substance on the planet. Yeah. So it was the easiest one to go to for him and I both. So when things, were not good, we could quite easily, just drink to try and, I guess, not feel or numb, not knowing at the time. Or even to celebrate, of course, because it's, it's so socially acceptable to be all of these things. But of course, for us, there was no off button for either of us. So, we'd both also grown up with generational trauma. So we both had our unhealthy coping mechanisms we'd brought together in this as well. And why I absolutely don't condone violence at all. I do have a deep understanding now of, the way and the whys of how he was. So for me,
well, do you want to just share a little bit about that, just out of curiosity, for those kind of going, why do men just get violent? And of course, there is absolutely no exception to the rule, but like, can you share a little bit of your understanding, a little bit of pearls of wisdom around why they get like this?
Yeah. So my understanding came that I wanted to dive deeper into knowing it, because one of my core reasons when I finally did break free was not wanting this to happen to my children. Because when I started, I love the brain and how it works. So I started diving deeper, and I went to a beautiful group. I think it was called a butterfly support group, and a psychologist as well. So I was trying to do every angle and trying to understand them so I could understand what had happened to me, not to make it okay. And so what I learned in that is about, I think the percentage was around 1 in 3 children of domestic violence relationships will then in turn end up being either in a domestic violence relationship or a perpetrator. The two men that I had in my life that were violent both had violent fathers, had grown up with violent fathers, and both had brothers that were the opposite. So it had gone both ways.
Uh-huh. Did he ever accuse you of being the narcissist or the abuser or the one that's causing all the pain or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was often told that it was my fault, that I was the one bringing this out in him, that I was, everything was my fault essentially, for the second relationship, definitely. So yeah, I was definitely accused of everything.
Wow. So you know what? We want to hear, all of us, I want to hear this. What was the grace? What was your grace to coming out of this?
Yeah, it's because I've had the two relationships that were like that. It's kind of like the first one, he was violent when drunk, more so, and could be quite horrible and nasty. But the last time was very physical, like fists and punching, to the point where connected with my face. And in that instant, I just felt my whole face, just blow up. With my baby girl was in my arms crying, or our baby girl, I should say, as well. So trying to wake up from that, I was in so much pain. I didn't actually really have an eye. It was so swollen and so black. That was the final straw then for me, to say, well, the final straw, I said, you need to get help if you're to come home again, after being away at work. He chose when he got home from work not to get help. So I chose to pack up the house and leave. And unfortunately, I did again fall into another relationship. And this time we had been maybe on and off quite together for 4 years. There had even been an instant court order from the police in one of the 3 or 4 times they'd taken him away. The house was so broken up, I was covered in blood, and they put an instant restraining order on him in that time. That wasn't the end of it, though. We got back together. He was so in a rage at me having that, even though I didn't put it there, that I went through the process of getting that removed and facing a judge while he looked me in the eyes to tell me, is this your choice?
Yeah.
And I said,
it's very intimidating, isn't it?
oh, yeah.
It's very intimidating and almost cold when someone can look into your eyes as a lover, as a partner, as a friend, as a human, from one human to another, and bring you into that place, almost like push you in a corner. It's like to completely deflate you. I mean, no good-hearted, conscious human being does that.
No.
I mean, of course, everybody, goes through highs and lows, and there's, we've all got faults, but to push another woman, to push someone into a corner like that, when you realize and you already know that you've pushed her to the limit and you're not good for each other, that's another story. And of course, as women, a lot of us, we're nurturers, we're givers, we want to please. What happened to you in that place? Did you kind of go, yep, no, it is my choice?
I did say in the court, I said, yes, it's my choice, but underlying all I felt behind me was the pressure. It wasn't my choice. There'd been horrific arguments. There'd been, we'd started each other again. That added the layer of fear of the police seeing that we were together. There'd been a lot more violence since then. So I did it again to appease and to try and bring down that level.
Yeah.
And then I think there was another year or so continuing with this relationship. We ended up not living in the same house, but still having time together. And the final ending of that for me, again, I couldn't choose it for myself. Unfortunately, I didn't have the level of self-love and respect that I needed to know that I was worth anymore. So I actually thought that this is what I did deserve, because my self-talk was so low that I believed it all. My father passed away. And after he'd passed away, I didn't have time to grieve him as I was in this relationship. And it wasn't until his headstone was ready and me and my beautiful auntie and cousins and my children went to visit his grave. We didn't have room in the car for him. And I wanted this to be time for me and my auntie and my family. So we just went. And somehow, even in this time that I was meant to have to finally be with my family and grieve my father, this was still all about him. It was always all about him. And I started on the way back home on the drive when we got back to Adelaide. My auntie, I was still spending time with her, and my grandma. I started getting all these messages, and they were quite psychotic sometimes, like accusations all the time. I was always accused of being on a dating site that I wasn't on, or being with, or doing, you name it. It was always like crazy things. And they started again on the way home from, literally laying my father, having the headstone, feeling like I wanted some space to grieve him. And he literally just started again. And for me, it was, am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah, we can just buzz it out if we need to.
Well, that was fucking it.
Yeah, that was it. That was the end. That was all. Yeah, of course.
That was like, get the hell out, get out of my life. Like, no, like I couldn't even have the time, space to be with my own children, my own family, and grieve my own father. So that, like, I wish it was for me. I wish I did it for me. And in the end, ultimately, it was for me and my children, but it took something bigger or greater than it for me.
It almost feels like it was the wisdom and the love or the grief of losing someone so connected. So, like your dad, his blood, he's your father, he's your guardian, losing somebody like that and then having somebody at you at the same time, it'll generate a wisdom from within to say, something's not right. So I need to find my own way here.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your own trauma or trauma itself plays a part in why we get looped into these abuser, victim, perpetrator cycles, Suzannah?
Absolutely.
Or
Now,
can that happen to everybody, anyone?
Yeah. I didn't have the awareness of it then. I absolutely do now. So I also grew up in a home where there was violence, not with me, not with my mother. Love my mother and father to pieces. They were absolutely doing the best that they could. I had a beautiful childhood with the knowledge and tools that they had, but what they had was a lot of trauma coming down through their parents also. So my father was the third in a generation of war veterans. As well as the way that they were reprimanded or disciplined by their father was through physical violence and abuse, as was my brother. So I did grow up in a home where there was physical violence. I did grow up in a place where I had a father that was, now I know, constantly in fight and flight. So my body, nervous system was also constantly in that, or in sympathetic dominant state. So I do now have the knowledge and tools to know that we do align with people in the same resonance or with the same nervous system, essentially.
I love that. And I just want to share an example about that if I can.
Please.
I've met people who have come into my life who I haven't really gelled with, but they're part of the community. And I know that when they've done the work, they've stepped up. It could be like 5, 6 years, all of a sudden we're actually in the same circle and we are vibing, we are connecting, we are communicating, we're building a friendship. And we're both like, oh, we weren't able to do that 5 years ago. But we're on the same level. We've done the work emotionally and spiritually, if you like, mentally, we can hold each other in that space. And I feel like was that kind of what you were just saying? We attract people in the same resonance?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I feel obviously that's how I ended up in the unhealthy or catastrophic relationships, was that I had a dysregulated nervous system, so I'm not going to attract a healthy, stable love or relationship when I also didn't know what a healthy, stable life or relationship was. That hadn't been what I'd witnessed. I didn't have any of the skills or anything for relationships myself. And again, this is not a condemning of, violence. It's just I didn't have healthy relationship skills. I didn't have emotional relating skills or emotional intelligence. Growing up in that country environment is so beautiful, but it's literally, I grew up like one of the boys. You grow up tough, you fall off the horse, you get back on. Literally, for me, you don't feel emotions. You just get up and you do, and you push on through, and then you work hard, you play hard, and then you drink hard. Yeah. And that was the cycle that we repeated.
Yeah. So tell me, what are some of the steps that you've taken to break the cycle of trauma for future generations, for yourself, but especially also for your children?
Yeah, for me, when I first left, it was 2016. I went really deep into my yoga practices. So for me, that was my healing sanctuary, really. I went really deep into my meditation, yoga, pranayama. and just really began healing. Stopped drinking then for, I think it was around a year and a half. And then just coming home to myself, really coming home to getting to know myself, because after growing up in fight and flight and running away from home at 15 and then ongoing unhealthy codependent relationships, I really didn't even know me. I didn't even know what I didn't want, didn't like. I'd always given myself to a partner and then kind of just gone on with their life and then had children and then just become a mum. And so I was more just surviving along the way. So for me, coming to yoga was a place where I really got to connect with my inner world, to come home to my heart and my soul and start listening to those messages and thank you. And
Amazing.
cultivating
This is great. This is really, this is where we need to celebrate and actually pat ourselves on the back and, you know, acknowledge this, because it's not easy. So well done.
God, no. God, no. So that was, I guess, a place to start cultivating safety for me and my body, and went on a beautiful yoga retreat to Cambodia, and that just solidified for me that I wanted to do yoga teacher training. Loved the breath component so much that along the track, I then fell into another relationship, not violent, but still not healthy. And then a little bit of drinking on that one. And it took me getting a rock bottom of realizing that my unhealthy coping mechanism of the drinking when I fell into an unhealthy relationship was mine as well. Like I had to actually face me for the first time.
Absolutely.
So I registered and knew that I come from a long line of alcoholics on my father's side, or highly functioning, as you would say, because they worked, had businesses, did all the things. So we don't often look at alcoholics or alcohol dependency being a problem when people are still running around in society with jobs and things. And so I had a job, I was engaged, I had my kids and my life and my house. So to me, I wasn't an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I didn't want to put that label on myself. I would just, on Fridays, get wine with my girlfriends and possibly drink 2 bottles to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then when times were not good, that cycle would continue to the point of not having an off button. So it took me getting to a real rock bottom of actually not wanting to be here on the planet. So I was suicidal to the point where I thought my children would actually be better off without me being their mother, because I felt so shit. I felt so ashamed of some of the choices, bad decisions I was making, because I was hurting and because I was in so much pain. I was making bad choices for myself, bad choices with men. So I thought that they would be better off with someone else. And feeling that pain really was the catalyst for me to face myself, as well as all of the trauma I'd been carrying around for 3+ decades.
Wow. Yeah, that's that's the deep dark night of the soul, but the reality of confronting your own mirror, the reflection and the truth and the habits and the whatever it is, I feel like can be one of the hardest things to do, especially if we have been abused externally, because there's sometimes we just don't want to see that part of ourselves that's also adding to, our environments. Did you find a way out of alcohol?
Yeah, for me, then I have a beautiful imagination as well. So luckily I was able to imagine what would happen to my children then if they didn't have me, and or if they had a mother that committed suicide. And the pain of that for them was greater than the pain that I was feeling. So I had a choice in that moment. I had a choice that I could keep going and they wouldn't have a mother, because that inevitably the way I was treating myself was the way it would go. Or I could wake the hell up, face myself, all of my shadows and the demons I felt like I was carrying, as well as all the pain and suitcases I'd been dragging along. So I made a clean-cut decision that night or that day, that I was never drinking again.
Wow. When was this?
That was 2019. So it's been over 5 years now. Thank you. And again, so it was a generational thing. Like my brother died at 27 from essentially drinking himself to death, and knowing that it was in the family, knowing that it was a possibility for me, knowing that if I kept going, it was going to be a possibility for my children. It was I cannot do this anymore. So I didn't go to AA essentially.
Suzannah, was it just a decision? There's so many people we're speaking to online on this podcast. They've a long history of, abuse with substances. And then one day they just like hit rock bottom and the next morning it's done. Was that what it was like for you? Or did you receive support along the journey?
Yeah, so it was done. Like I made a decision. I did reach out to a friend as well. I did call AA just to get some support and guidance. I didn't feel that was the path I wanted to go on. I'm a very strong-willed individual when I make a decision, which has been a blessing and a curse sometimes. And then I got Russell Brand's book, Recovery,
Aha.
which I loved. I found really good because I could relate to that. So that one I found really beautiful and beneficial to help me along my path. And then I made a very clean cut decision. And then I got really clear I started my yoga teacher training, and I got really clear and did a big energetic cleanup of my life and who was in my life and who was supporting the life that I wanted and who was a piss drinking associate, essentially, because I had so many of those. And then ultimately I had a little handful of friends, and I had to make a choice then. Do I want to essentially evolve or repeat?
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got so many questions. I'm going to try and limit them because I know we're on a time limit. I feel like we can have this conversation for a long time. How did you, so essentially, did you cut the relationships and the environments completely, or did you need that space before you could go back into some of the environments or the festivals or the expos or, friendship circles, or was it just like a clean cut?
Some of both. So
Yeah.
some I assessed and could really truly see that there was no actual deep connection that was going to serve me,
Yeah.
that they were just drinking friends or associates. I cut out like pubs and places like that completely for quite some time. And they're still not a place I like, to be honest. I try and avoid. But I also then did avoid, I didn't go out perhaps for dinner or any festivals or any socials for a minimum of at least 3, if not even 6 months. I really just took myself inward, as I said, to my yoga teacher training, dedicated my time to really evaluating myself and really, really deep healing, because this was the first time I had really ultimately faced everything that I had been running away from my whole life.
Amazing. And did you do this by going in and hibernating and really self-reflecting and asking yourself these really important questions to create change? But did you also have support around you? Was it one of the friends and you called AA, or was there any other circle, or was it more the yoga training and the breath work and being involved in those practices that really supported your recovery?
Yeah, so it was a combination. I had a couple of girlfriends that were beautiful, close support, and one in particular that did live just behind me. So I obviously told my closest friends, my family. I made a decision, got any of the alcohol straight out of my house, anything that I knew was going to be a temptation, or anywhere as well. And then, yeah, the people that I did yoga with and the people that I did meditation with, they became like a new family as such. And a place that was a safe haven, as well as the close friends, close family, and the people I reached out to for support, and going in and really starting to get to know me.
So looking back 5 years prior, what would you say would be the biggest change from the past version of Suzannah to the Suzannah who I'm speaking with today?
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
I feel like I have died and rebirthed and so many times now, I can't keep up. The biggest change for me, well, this is it. The biggest change for me is that I love myself now. That's at the core of it. That's at the root of it, is that,
All chills.
yeah, that I truly unconditionally love myself now.
Can I ask you to just describe describe what does loving yourself actually feel like?
Oh,
What does it
it
feel
is
like?
the most beautiful feeling in the world to finally come home to just honoring and loving yourself and knowing that you are beautiful and worthy and deserving of just beauty and bliss and love in the world, just for being, just
Yeah.
simply for being, not for doing, having, changing, trying to fit in, none of that. Just for who you are.
Yeah.
Is just the most beautiful, blissful feeling on the planet, and freeing. It is so freeing to be able to just take off all the layers and the weight that
Mhm.
weren't you in the beginning anyway.
And the contributions and extensions, you know, if we're in, and I'm kind of always reflect, imagine we could feel that love for ourselves and acceptance and that respect. What we breathe and dream and vision and create into the world as an extension of that love. And how can that ripple out to our children, our families, our lovers, our communities, our humanity? And I'm like, let's just, you know, it'd be so nice, not
Yes.
nice, but great to like touch that space inside.
Yes.
I want to ask you, what advice would you have to give others who want to break free from cycles of abuse and trauma in their own lives? It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big one, but I love it because it's everything that I've done on my path and am doing on my path now with the people that I serve as well. So it's first of all, for me to be able to break it is to face yourself, is to ultimately get truthful with yourself, because we know deep down inside the things that are hurting us, the people, the places, the things, and we need to come home to our hearts. So I mean, if we can come home to our heart and our soul, reaching out for support, absolutely 100%. Like if you don't know how to do it yourself and you've been going through the cycles for so long that you don't know where you're self-sabotaging or where you're coming or going, then reaching out for the support that you need that resonates or aligns with you, so that you can come home. And for me, that's the breath has been one of the biggest catalysts in that as well. And the rebirthing journey that I so love, in being able to cleanse and clear the nervous system, in being able to come out of states where you feel so even scared and fearful. Like I didn't even feel safe in my own body, particularly after my back surgery and not walking. Like that's a whole another episode probably.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and I had stored so much in my nervous system that, you know, to constantly be stressed, anxious, fighty and flighty, like we need to know how to calm. We need to know how to ground. We need to know how to come home. And for me, the breath has been such a beautiful tool for that. That's why I'm such a big lover of the energetics and somatics as well.
Amazing. And so are you free from, would you say that you are free now from the alcohol?
Oh, absolutely. I haven't touched a drop in
So you
over
haven't
5
even
years.
introduced it back into your life.
Hell no, never will.
I
Don't
love
want to
that.
taste of it ever.
Would you say that that's also symbolic of you not abusing or your self-abuse and or self-medication, self-numbing? Therefore, the same will reflect back in the relationships that you attract. Are you in a relationship right now?
I am in a beautiful divine union now. Finally made my way through, and you know, everything that was my teacher. Sometimes we have to learn what love isn't to learn what true love is. That's not the path I wish for everyone, but for me, this is my journey. And knowing that these are all my stepping stones along my path to be able to be here and share my messages now. So yes, I have a beautiful, safe, healthy, loving, honoring, unconditional love now, which is beautiful.
All tills. And, you know, this is also worth pointing out for all of our viewers, but also for you, Suzannah, is that you've been able to take the dark and take the trauma and take the abuse and take the violence and all of these aspects, sit in your own truth and actually alchemize. You've chosen to take the pain and you've chosen to rebirth, die and rebirth, to bring this love into your life, into your being. So I just want to say to anyone listening, you can choose to create beautiful stories within the battle scars that you wear, the battle scars that have maybe been served to you. You can change that story for yourself. Suzannah, what would you say to someone who feels hopeless, unloved, or worthless based on their experience?
That you are loved, that you are loved. And if you can't see it yourself right now, then reach out to someone, because you are loved. Even when I felt so hopeless and so unlovable or unworthy, you know, just reaching out to someone for support, or, you know, even whether it be on the internet, wherever it is, for what you're going through. Like there is so many beautiful modalities, services, people, you know, there's, you know, little beacons of hope around. There's so many of us that have been through and transformed through so many horrific things, and you are not alone. You are not alone.
And for people who genuinely just feel like, oh, I just can't get up again. I just have taken so many knocks down. What would you say would be just the very first small step to hope?
Yeah, that's a big one, because I felt like I had been knocked down too many times.
A lot of us have, and we live in a
Yeah.
society that basically asks you to continue amplifying the stress.
Yeah.
Bible and money and family and just internet.
Yeah. For me, it's now in hindsight, knowing that it is where you're actually growing. It's where you're getting your most growth and your most wisdom, and that nothing is permanent. So we even have seasons and cycles in life. So nothing is permanent.
I love that.
Yeah, nothing is permanent, and that you will and come out of this and then potentially use that along your path. Like, this may be everything you asked for, not in the way that you asked for it. For me, like, there's no way I wouldn't be on this path of my soul if I had chosen it, because I was doing a different business and I was doing different things in life until I got realigned by the universe multiple times. And if it wasn't for everything that happened in my life, I wouldn't be being of service the way I am today. So it's been able to be like, my pain has turned into my purpose, essentially.
I love that. It's like, moving from wounding to wisdom and trauma to transformation. I love that, pain into purpose.
Yeah.
How can individuals begin to recognize their own worth and start on a path of self-love?
I love it.
You can talk about it is a big question, and it's going to be different for each person. But through your wisdom, what would you say? Yeah.
In the beginning, starting with your self-talk. I know I was my worst, harshest critique. It didn't matter even what the abusive partner or what other people could say to me. I was so horrible. My inner dialogue and the way I spoke to myself was, I would beat myself down. So I would start with getting aware of how you're talking to yourself, how you're viewing yourself, and becoming your own best friend. Because in my Empower Fitness days with women, that was the main thing, was about, I would ask them to tell me even something they loved about themselves, and they often couldn't. But if their friend was there, I'd say, well, tell me something you love about your friend, and they'd rattle off 10 things. So it's about becoming even our own best friend and lover, and beginning to give ourselves that love first.
And for those of you listening, I'm going to actually take this opportunity to pull out a notepad, pull out your journal, and write that down. What do you love about yourself? And, what do you like about yourself? And what are some of the gifts that you have? And if you can't answer that, perhaps even look at it from a different angle. What are some of the gifts that you give others? Because sometimes for people, it's easier to understand how we can magnify other people's lives and then bring that back into yourself. So I love that. I'm going to actually also do that little exercise as I'm on my way to uni.
Yeah, I love that. And we did a beautiful women's retreat a couple of years ago, and we even went to the part where, writing yourself a love letter. That's maybe another step deeper, but writing yourself a love letter and even a forgiveness letter, it's a really beautiful practice to go through.
Oh, boom. You and I are on the same wavelength. So I was going to say, like, we do make silly, I'm going to use the word silly mistakes, but I always kind of go, you can correct your path. Whatever mistake you've made, you have the ability through faith, through tenacity, through courage to correct your path. And I feel like the biggest step, for me, what I've had to do for me is forgive myself and actually know that I'm forgiven by a power that's greater than any person that actually can forgive me, because people may not be able to forgive you for what you've done. But, can you talk to us a little bit about self-forgiveness?
Absolutely. This was the biggest part or key for me, I feel, because I did harbor so much guilt, shame, blame, self-blame, even for the way things were in my life. So being able to come in, and it is not easy. It is not easy. So going into these parts of self, it hurts. We have to be able to go in there and feel the pain, feel the shame, feel the blame, and then release them. And then, actually genuinely forgive ourselves. And it doesn't mean we're forgiving necessarily the person or the situation, but we're freeing ourselves. That forgiveness. Yeah, I think I wrote a piece a couple of years ago. I literally called it, forgiveness is the key that sets your heart free.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because if we're holding any shame, blame, resistance, we're armoring up. We've got layers over our own heart to ourselves and the external world. So it's where it begins is forgiveness. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And self-compassion. This we're so
Yeah.
used to giving everybody, it's that self-compassion and forgiveness. Thank you so much, Suzannah. I wanted to ask you, is there anything else that you feel like is bubbling that you would like to add today for our viewers here on Freebird? And I'm celebrating your wings of freedom as a Freebird. And I'm also going to give Steph, if you've got anything to add as a little, or if you've got a question for Stephanie before we finalize the podcast today.
Yeah, the last thing I'd love to, well, thank you for the freeing of my wings. It's an absolute pleasure. But just to get more educated and more knowledge, like there is not enough out there unless you go searching. So, we want to make changes that ripple out into the world of self-love, of breaking these generational patterns. So we need more education. What I noticed in being a neurodivergent person and then my children was that I just thought that was just a medical thing. I didn't realize that was a nervous system thing. So getting to know yourself so that you can change, so that you can know your children as well. And we can make those changes and spread ripples of love out into the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Education, training. I love that. Yeah, I totally agree.
Beautiful.
Steph, do you have a question for, do you have any questions for Suzannah?
I was just really amazed by your story. Thank you so much for sharing, and just found that your resilience to keep going, and it was especially touched just by the moments of, the dark night of the soul where you felt, life wasn't worth living anymore. And then to take that, because in my experience, seeing people with that space, it is seeing people who love you like your children, and knowing that their pain would be much greater than your pain. And when putting that into a relativity, it's like, okay, now you know where you're at and what to work on. So I just want to honor that part of you, and that your children were a big part of the project. And it seems like your entire life has become the project, and you're doing things for people who were in situations like you. But was there anything else at that point that you were in that dark night of the soul that just really brought you towards this remembrance that you can make a change in your life?
Yeah, the other piece was, as I briefly mentioned, that my brother died at 27 from breaking himself, from the pain. And I didn't want myself, my children, or anyone else on this planet to have to feel such pain that they didn't feel they could be on this planet anymore. So I had a choice to either keep going down into the darkness or to come back, and not at the time did I know, to then be a light, to shine a light for others, to show that there is another way, that you can, you are so deserving and worthy, of being here on this planet and loved.
Thank you so much, Suzannah, for being here with us today. For
Thank you.
during Freebird for Freebird. If anyone's got any questions for Suzannah and you would like to channel some of those questions for her, if you want to hear about anything else relating to Suzannah's journey, please email us, contact us. We will have the podcast on Freebird and on Spotify, so we will make it accessible for everybody. And if you want to get in contact with Suzannah, Suzannah, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook as Suzannah Ananda, Instagram Suzannah Ananda _ soul medicine. So soul medicine is what I go by. Everything that I do, use, and love in the world of healing and self-love comes under me as soul medicine. So yeah,
Amazing.
Please do reach out if you have any questions. And thank you so much for sharing your time and energy with me today. It's an absolute pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for your transparency, and we shall see you again. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and thank you. Bye.